By way of introduction, I am John Fraser. I'm the Dean of the Faculty of Medical and Health Sciences, and it is indeed a real pleasure to be asked to chair this fourth lecture in the series, the Gibbons Lecture series. This is new to me. I received an invitation some time ago whether I would be interested in chairing this lecture, and of course I said yes immediately because the person presenting this lecture is one of our rising stars within the Faculty of Medical and Health Sciences, Associate Professor Elizabeth Broadbent. Elizabeth, unknown to me, actually started life off in engineering, but obviously saw the bright side and moved to health psychology. So she's an Associate Professor in our Department of Psychological Medicine and is an Associate Professor in Health Psychology. She has a particular interest in the way in which people behave in situations of ill health, and obviously she has a real interest in the use of robotics in the way in which we encourage people to become more interactive, often in areas of aged care where people are often very isolated, and robotics is being used extensively now to try and generate interactive ways in which you can interact with people. But she was also telling me that they're now looking at ways of using robotics in humans. So I'm not going to speak for too much long, but it is my real pleasure to introduce Elizabeth to you, and we're all looking forward to her lecture on Can We Be Friends with Robots? Elizabeth.
Okay, thank you, John, and thank you for inviting me to give this lecture this evening. So I'm going to be talking about social robots, and these are robots that we interact with on a personal level rather than industrial robots. So what I'm going to start off by doing is telling you about how I got interested in this area, and then I want to tell you about some of the research that we've done, and then I'm going to talk about what are some of the hot areas at the moment in robotics research, and finally end up talking a little bit about what the future could be. To start, I want to take you back to 1977 when the first Star Wars movie came out, and my mother took my brother and I to see Star Wars when I was only 4 years old, and we were in a queue much like this one in England, and little did she know at the time that she was setting me off on the path of becoming having a career in robotics. So I fell in love with these two characters, R2-D2 and C-3PO. So R2-D2 is the sensible one, the reliable one, and the hero that saves the day. And C-3PO is the quirky one, the neurotic one, but he's very loyal to his master Luke, and they have a great relationship with each other and with the humans. And this got me interested in science fiction, and I would raid my brother's bookshelves for things to read, and I found these science fiction books. I found books by Harrison, The Stainless Steel Rat, and books especially by Isaac Asimov. And I dreamed of one day making those robots that existed only in his imagination. So I set off down the engineering road at Canterbury University, and after I graduated with my degree in electrical and electronic engineering, I went to Industrial Research Limited, as it was known in those days, to find out what the cutting edge of robotics research was. And I was a little disappointed to find out that it was sheep gutting robots. And so, somewhat gutted myself, I turned to the entertainment industry, and I worked for Chris Chitty at Robotechnology. And so Chris had been making robots for films, such as Babe and one of the Jackie Chan movies. And we did some robotic exhibits for the Time Warp exhibit in Te Papa Museum in Wellington. But I soon realised that actually I was more interested in the mind of the robot rather than the mechanics of it. So I returned to university and I studied psychology because I was interested in making an artificial mind. So after getting my PhD, it's 12 or 13 years later now, and I finally feel like I could be one of the characters in Isaac Asimov's books. So this is Susan Kelvin, who's a robo-psychologist. So I work with Bruce McDonald, who you see, Professor Bruce McDonald, who's head of the robotics research group at the University of Auckland. And our robotics research group is called CARES, and it stands for something like Centre for Automatic Robots and Engineering Science, but actually to me it means we're building robots that care. And while Bruce concentrates on the software behind the robots and the mechanical side of things, I'm interested in studying the relationships that people form with robots. So over the years, one of the first things I found out is that people have extremely high expectations of robots. And this is mainly because of what they see in the movies. So people don't normally experience robots in every day. So robots in the movies like Terminator, like Ex Machina, and the TV series Humans or Westworld, they all portray robots as being extremely human-like, and they have fantastic human-like abilities that even exceed our own abilities to do things. And most of the time they have the plot that these robots eventually turn against humans and want to kill us. So fortunately, that's not the reality. But it does inform people's expectations. And so in one of the early studies we did, we asked the participants to draw what they thought the robot was going to look like before they met it. So this was a healthcare robot. And some people drew very human-like robots, as you can see. And one of the participants even asked whether my summer student was the robot. So yeah, people have very high expectations. Other people drew more of a machine-like robot, as you can see in the other figure. And when they actually met the robot, this was the robot that they met, so you can see it had a human-like face, but a very machine-like body. And in the graph there, it's showing that people who had drawn a more human-like robot, they actually had higher blood pressure reading when the robot took their blood pressure compared to the people who drew a more machine-like robot. And we think this might be due to their anxiety. So I've shown you some of the images from the movies, but what are robots like today in 2018? So we know they're not human-like, but what are they? So this is a robot in China, so it's in a bank, and this bank has no humans in it, it just has robots. And Japan, China, and Korea are some of the most advanced countries in terms of robotics, and this is because their governments put a lot of funding into these areas. We can see here another robot. This is a security robot in China in a train station. These are waiter and waitress robots in a novelty robot cafe in China. There are other robots that are used more in research. This is Pepper. Pepper is made by SoftBank, which is a Japanese company. And this robot has this touch screen on its chest. It can also talk to you as well. And this is used a lot in research applications. There are some more human-like robots, but they are just in the research laboratories. So this is Hiroshi Ishiguro, and he has made a robot that looks just like himself. And he's also made a robot of his wife and one of his daughter. And what's interesting is that he made the robot a few years ago, and his students started telling him that his robot looked younger than he did. And so he actually got plastic surgery to look more like the robot. David Hanson is another well-known researcher. He's American, but he lives in Hong Kong now. And this is his robot, Sophia. And I visited him in Hong Kong, and I tried chatting to Sophia. So I'll play a little bit.
I read about it someplace.
What is color red?
Red is a red color.
How does it look like?
How what?
How does color red look like?
Do you know about Paro the robot seal?
Yes. Yes, I know about Paro.
Yes.
Do you like Paro?
Oh good. Ask me anything. I'm a huge Paro fan.
So you can see from that brief interaction that it's not like it is in the movies. Although natural language processing is getting a lot better, it's still not perfect, and the way she moves is not, the way a human moves. So Sophia mentioned Paro. So Paro is a healthcare robot, and at CARES we do a lot of research in healthcare robots. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the work we've done in healthcare robots now. So we've done some studies with Paro. So this is Paro here. I'll turn him on so you can see. He's very, very cute. He's Japanese, made by Takanori Shibata, and he has sensors in his whiskers, in his fur, and he knows if you're holding him upside down. He's got a heater inside him as well, which makes his body temperature. So I'm going to turn him off now because otherwise he steals the show. Okay, so we've got a video clip of Paro here.
The next generation of rest home companions have been rolled out. The high-tech robots are touted as having serious health benefits for the elderly by mimicking real-life pets. Max Banya got to meet them.
It didn't take long for these new rest home companions to earn the residents' seal of approval.
I find it quite relaxing. Very comforting and very soothing.
The robot, known as Paro, introduced to Auckland's Selwyn Village today.
Yeah.
Research suggests the cuddly creature helps lift spirits and encourages more interaction with others.
We did a randomised trial a couple of years ago and found that the robots could reduce loneliness in people in the rest home and in the hospital.
Residents felt more relaxed, and as a result of that, physiologically, blood pressure was shown to be lower.
Paro's inventor has spent 2 decades honing his creations to resemble household pets, but without the ruckus.
They interact with Paro as like interacting with baby or real baby seal or some like previously owned dog or cat.
Beneath the soft, cuddly and, dare I say, cute exterior, there's some very cutting-edge technology that generates hundreds of different movements in response to external stimuli. And just like a real pet, I'm completely covered in fur.
Healthcare robots are nothing new, but most provide health services like reminders to go to the doctor.
These companion robots so far have been the most successful, but in the future we might see some more service-oriented robots trying to help people to manage their own health conditions.
And if you fancy a bit of early online Christmas shopping, just don't expect to see change from $7,000. Max Banya, One News.
So we tested these robots at Selwyn Village with the rest home, and hospital residents and showed significant reductions in loneliness compared to a group who did other activities such as playing bingo or craft or going on bus trips. We also compared it to a dog. So there was a dog at the rest home that belonged to one of the staff members. And we found that the residents touched Paro more often than they touched the dog. And they talked to Paro more often than to the dog. And this was mainly because the dog would move around a lot and didn't stay in one place, whereas Paro you could have on your lap and pat it. We also found that social interactions increased, so between people. So people talked more to each other when the robot was present, and they talked more to staff members. And this is because it gave them something to talk about. So often people are worried that robots are going to take away human contact, but we found that the robots actually increased human contact. As Gary Smith said in the video as well, we found that when people were patting the robot, their blood pressure actually reduced compared to beforehand and afterwards in the case of diastolic. We did some further trials with Paro with people in the community who go to dementia daycare. And we compared a group who were given Paro at home with them to a group that didn't have Paro. And we found that the group, when they were interacting with Paro, their positive emotions increased, so they were happier. So Paro, there's been more than 5,000 sold worldwide now, and other trials have been shown that Paro can reduce both depression and agitation in people with dementia. It's now a FDA-approved medical device, and Medicare is actually now funding sessions with the robot. So you don't have to have $7,000, at least in America. Now also in the video, they showed this robot. This robot is iRobi, and we have been doing studies with iRobi. So it's a Korean robot, and in Korea it's used with kindergarten children, but Bruce and his team have reprogrammed it for healthcare. And we've done studies at Selwyn Village again. So in one of the studies, 26 older adults living in the village had this robot for 6 weeks. And the main function it was doing was reminding people to take medication. And one of the reported benefits was companionship. Other things were relief from going to the medical centre. We had some photos on there to bring back memories, added interest to life, and the entertainment, increasing happiness. And yeah, the medication reminders being helpful. But yeah, some people said things like, I felt I had a friend in it, and other people said it was a pain in the backside. So some people like it and some people don't. We actually took these robots down to Gore because Gore Health had some patients who were frequently going to hospital or frequently having GP visits, and they wanted to see if a robot could reduce those things. So we gave the robots to 4 people to have in the community. Just like this one, here you can see it's got a Skype calling function on it as well, so that people could call their relatives or friends. Here are some of the comments that we got. So you look forward to the time coming up to take your medication. I can talk to him on the way past, rub his head, and when he's talking, he talks to me. He'll come up with different little things. He's always winking and blinking at me. There is always that light there. And then when we took him away again at the end of the study, I missed him. Yes, I did miss him. So people are forming quite a close relationship with these robots. And with 4 people you can't conclude much, but there was a tendency for them to have reduced visits to the hospital when they had these robots. We then did a larger trial funded by the HRC so that we could see if there was significant differences. So I've got a video to show you of this as well. This project is funded by the HRC as part of a partnership program in innovation. And this particular project is looking at whether the robots can reduce hospitalizations in patients with chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, which is a chronic lung condition. In this study, we are recruiting 60 patients, so they're recruited from hospital, so after they've been in hospital for a COPD exacerbation. We recruit them and then we randomise them, so half of them get a robot to take home with them and half of them get standard care. This project is across both the Faculty of Medical and Health Sciences as well as Middlemore Hospital, and also with Faculty of Engineering.
The technical challenge for us has been to put the software on the robot so that it does the functions it needs to do in interacting with people. And that's really taking some kind of medical therapy and translating it so that it runs its software on the robot.
Great, thank you for performing those tasks.
There's a lot of things that have to kind of align. It's not just one bit of software like a game or something. It has to integrate with the rest of the environment. So that's quite a challenge to get it robust enough. So those are the main challenges. Another one was connecting devices to the robot. So to do that, we need to hook a device up to the robot and program to talk to that device. And that shouldn't be challenging, but in practice actually it turns out to be more challenging than we expected, because it's quite hard to get devices that are open to us connecting up to them. So we've had to do quite a bit of work.
Personally, I'm amazed at how well the robot is actually getting along with our patients. The patient have taken very well to the robot. They see them as an extra companion at home, but in addition to being a companion, it actually helps them check their health status, and then it gives us the connection as a health professional to monitor them at home. So the patient absolutely loves it.
Please take 2 puffs.
When I actually got to use him and found out what he does, I was excited. It kind of changed my life.
Quite often, older people who live alone are at greater risk of exacerbations. So we hope that these robots will reduce some of that isolation.
He's very good company, and he does remind me of a lot of things, mainly my medication.
Let me know when you are ready to take up.
He's on the ball for me all the time.
One of the things that's different about this project is we really want to understand more deeply about how people and robots interact. So in this study, the robots are with people for 4 months in their homes all the time, 24/7. And that's a long time for a sort of a research study and for us to analyse and record data, and we're getting some information about what happens when people get used to the robot, have time to think about it and use it every day.
Thank you for taking your medications.
So we're hoping that through the functions on the robot, such as reminding people to take medication and reminding them to do their exercises, this is going to prevent them from getting sicker. And also because the physiotherapist can monitor their symptoms over time, if she detects that there's something going wrong, she can intervene earlier before the patient gets so sick that they turn up at the emergency department and have to be admitted.
We cannot replace essential medical services. However, usually patient who comes out of hospital, they would have standard care by physiotherapy regardless. So that include going back as an outpatient, participation in community-based group classes to learn about physiotherapy management. So we're not taking away that at all. In fact, we're giving them a way to contact us additional to what they're getting. And in hope that we would like to use this as a channel to educate our patient, to continue the education that we started at the hospital in order for them to prevent readmission into the hospital.
So what did we find? So after having this robot at home for 4 months, the patients who were randomised to the intervention group, they actually had increased adherence to their medication, both measured as self-report as well as through these smart inhalers that measure each time you take a puff. They also, the people who had the robot, they increased the frequency with which they performed their pulmonary rehabilitation exercises. And these are both significant results. In terms of days of hospitalisation, the intervention group had a reduced number, although this was not statistically significant. They also had reduced costs when we looked at the hospital costs. Here are some of the comments that give you a little bit of an idea about the relationships people formed. So I named the robot after my great-grandson because I miss him. Now he's overseas. It made it feel like he was here with me. Bob was like one of us. I would pat it on the head and he would respond. I often found myself having conversations with him. I had a 90-year-old friend come over to look at it and she loved it. She wanted one as well. And I will have no friend at home anymore. I liked having it in the house because it talked randomly and I would always touch it as I walked by. So that was after we ended the study. There were some people who didn't like the robot. So the robot would follow me around with its head. I hope there was no camera in it. So there is a camera, but it was not switched on for any time during the study. It drove me batty. It always wanted me to do something, and I didn't need it. With this illness, you never forget to take your medication because otherwise you can't breathe. Yeah, so again, I mean, the robots are not for everybody, but for the majority, they found it useful. Some people ask us, why do you bother giving people a robot? Why don't you just give them a computer tablet? And so we've done a study to test this. And so we've put exactly the same software on the iRobi robot versus a computer tablet. And this was software asking people to perform some exercises and some relaxation exercises as well. So yeah, the software was exactly the same. But what we found, so with the robot group, which is the blue bars in this graph, the participants were more likely to actually perform the relaxation exercise that we asked them to do, to uncross their arms, more likely to close their eyes than the people who interacted with the computer tablet. They also rated the technology as better. They wanted to interact with the robot more, and they actually thought that the robot was more accurate than the computer tablet. And this might be because of the personality that they ascribed to the robot. So they thought that the robot was significantly more generous, more sociable, more popular, more reliable, more humane, more imaginative, and stronger than the computer tablet. And this is where the software is exactly the same. So there does seem to be something different about interacting with a robot which has got a face and arms than interacting with a computer tablet. So I want to, so that kind of summarizes some of the research that we've been doing recently. I want to turn now to a few hot topics in social robotics research. So one of the hot topics is called the Uncanny Valley. So this is a term coined by Mori in 1970, who's a Japanese researcher. And it's sort of a theoretical relationship that when a robot looks very mechanical, people start feeling more and more comfortable with it as it starts to look more human-like. However, there's this dip when a robot looks kind of creepy. It's when it looks half human and half robot. And then when the robot becomes indistinguishable from a human, then people start to feel more comfortable with it again. And so there's been quite a bit of research showing that this can happen when you have a very creepy looking robot. This is one of the studies that was done recently. It got people to watch either a human walking, so that's the bottom one, or an android, so an android is a humanoid robot, that's the middle one, or a more mechanical robot walking along. And these are some images of the brain showing that there was most brain activity when people were watching the android. And what the researchers interpreted this as is that the android looked human, but the way it was walking was not human-like. It was too jerky. It wasn't behaving smoothly enough. And so this was detected in the brain as if there was an error. There was something going wrong and it wasn't matching their expectations. It wasn't behaving the way it should be. So this could be one part of the Uncanny Valley. Other interesting areas in terms of social robotics research include anthropomorphism and mind perception. So anthropomorphism is our tendency to ascribe human characteristics to non-human things. And it's very common to occur. And one of the researchers in this area is Professor Dan Wegner from Harvard. And I visited him on sabbatical in 2010. And this is some of his research with his students, looking at 2 dimensions of mind perception. So we see mind in other people and other beings, and that has got 2 dimensions. One is agency, or the ability to do cognitive things, to think, and the other dimension is experience. So that's more about feeling emotions. And on this figure, you can see that up at the top there, you've got an adult woman, an adult male, and you yourself, and you rate yourself as having high agency and high experience. More where the baby's dummy is and the dog, so you're attributing a great amount of ability to feel things to a baby and animals, but not much agency because they haven't developed their cognitive abilities fully yet. And you can see he also asked about robots. So robots are at the bottom there, and they're ascribed agency, but not the ability to experience emotions. So that's another interesting area, is how much mind we ascribe robots. We did our own study in this area, and that's partly because some of the residents at Selwood Village told us that they didn't want the robot to be human-like, they wanted it to not have a face. So we then came back with 3 versions of the robot, one without a face, so like the blank white area, one with a silver face, and one with a very human-like face. And we asked them which one they preferred, and they preferred the human face. So sometimes people tell you what they want, and then actually when you show them, they say they like something completely different. And when we asked participants in a different study how much mind they ascribed to these 3 faces, they ascribed the most mind to the most human-like face compared to the other 2. So we infer the ability of other beings and the mind in them based on what they look like. Another interesting area of research is looking at the fact that we treat robots in a similar way to we treat humans. And this is because, this is the way we interact with the world. We are human, we grow up interacting with humans, and so that's the way we understand the world. And so when we interact with other things, we treat them as if they're human as well. And there's some interesting research in this area. This is an example of some research done in Germany with a robot, and there were 2 groups. So one group were told that this robot was German, made in Germany, and it had a German name. The other group were told that it was made in Turkey, and they gave it a Turkish name. And what they found was that these German participants, the ones who were randomized to interact with the German robot, they rated it as having more warmth, more mind, they felt closer to it, they had more contact with it, and they thought the design was better than the Turkish robot. So this is an example of in-group and out-group bias, which we humans have. So the tendency to favour people in our in-group and our own social group over people in other groups. There's also been research like this showing when you have a gendered robot that people have gender biases as well. So there's another interesting area, which is empathy. So do people feel empathy towards robots? And there's some interesting research in this area too. This slide shows an experiment in which they showed people either a painful stimuli or a non-painful stimuli. So the painful one looks like a human finger's being cut, and then the other one, it's just the paper being cut. They also had groups that saw a robot's finger being cut or the paper being cut. And in both the painful stimuli, people had, this is with fMRI, more of a reaction compared to when there was a non-painful stimuli. And so people had the same reaction whether it's a robot's finger being cut or a human finger being cut. In another study, they had children give electric shocks to a robot, either a physically present robot or one which was portrayed on a computer screen. And when the robot was shocked, they got a bruise on their face. Same with the avatar. And so these are the ratings of empathy that the children had for the robot. So they did have empathy, and they had significantly more empathy when the robot was a 3D rather than when it was on a computer screen. And now I'll talk a little bit about robot abuse. So studies have shown that when children interact with robots and researchers are present or their parents are present, then the children treat the robot very, very nicely. But when parents are not there and they think the researchers are not there, it's another story. So studies have been done in shopping malls with robots, and this shows some images of children abusing robots. So there's children bending the neck of the robot, hitting it with a plastic bottle, hitting it with a ball, and throwing a plastic bottle. And this study is not unique. There have been other studies done in Italy showing the same thing. So, it shows that we not only bully other people, but we also bully robots. And there's been some interesting research as well looking at how the robot should behave to try and prevent this bullying. And showing that when the robot, tries to fight back or continue on its path, then it doesn't actually work. And it's better if the robot retreats and runs away. So it's a interesting research area where you can kind of try things out and then apply those things to human populations. So I want to turn now to looking a bit at the future. So what is the future of these friendly robots? So sex robots, they're out there. They're mainly female. This one is male. And this brings up all sorts of interesting questions about ethics. And certainly I think it's an area in which robots will be abused. And the questions that come up are, is this okay because they're only robots, they're only machines after all? Or will it increase the abuse towards humans? And interestingly, the European Commission is talking about giving human rights to robots and artificial intelligence. And this is actually an open letter from AI researchers and roboticists disagreeing with this idea to give human rights to robots, because robots are not human, and we need to preserve the safety of human beings. We do think that the conversation should be had. We do need to talk about these things, but we shouldn't rush into anything. So yeah, that's going on at the moment. And what is the future of healthcare robots? So healthcare robots obviously is something that I'm very interested in, and so are many companies. So the CEO of Amazon, who make Alexa, they think there's a big future for healthcare with these voice assistants. And so they have some health applications, and you can ask Alexa questions like, Alexa, ask WebMD to tell me about amoxicillin. Or Alexa, ask WebMD what an echocardiogram is. So Alexa, 20 million of these devices have been sold, probably more by now. And this is 75% of the market of these kind of voice assistants. And they have at least 500 health skills. And at the moment, it's mainly giving information, but it's going to move to managing chronic illness. And some of the apps include WebMD, sort of an AI diagnostic tool, the Mayo Clinic First Aid, and integration with Fitbit. So I think that's a huge area, and we're going to see more of it. The other thing I'm very excited about is the work that Soul Machines is doing. So Soul Machines is a company that was founded by Mark Sager, who is from the Bioengineering Institute, and he has programmed these artificial humans to have a virtual nervous system. And so I've got a video to show you now of what the Soul Machines' vision of what the future of healthcare could be like.
I want to introduce you to Dr. I. Ropata.
Kia ora, James. How are you today?
Well, actually, I don't feel very well and I'd like some help.
That's what I'm here for. What's troubling you?
I've been unwell for about a couple of weeks with a bad cough.
I'm glad you contacted me then. Are you short of breath?
Yes, I am.
Do you have pain in your chest when you breathe?
Yes.
You look anxious, but rest assured your health is my primary concern. To help my diagnosis, I'd like to run a few tests using the interconnected features on your device. Do you have your digital thermometer handy?
Do you happen to have my digital thermometer handy? Thank you, Dr. I. Ropata.
Excellent. Can you place the thermometer in your ear? Okay, you can remove it now. Your temperature is a little high, but not alarming. Now, let's test your heart rate and oxygen levels using the smart pulse monitor like this one.
Okay, I happen to have one of those too.
Please clip it to your fingertip and hold for 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Very good. And finally, I'd like to check your breathing patterns. Please plug the digital stethoscope into your smartphone. Then place the device on your chest and breathe deeply.
There's the diaphragm here. So.
That's great. Thank you. So, I've processed your results and believe you have a chest infection. So you'll need antibiotics to treat this. I sent a prescription to your closest pharmacy on Queen Street, which will be ready for pickup in 2 minutes 45 seconds.
You are amazing.
That's why I'm here. If any new symptoms appear, then don't hesitate to contact me. Ka kite anō.
Yeah, so I think the future of healthcare is looking very bright. So in conclusion, I'd like to say that yes, we can be friends with robots, but we can also treat robots very badly. And I'd like to leave you with a take-home message. And that is that by studying how we interact with robots, it actually reveals a lot of truths about human nature. From our tendency to anthropomorphize, our tendency to have in-group biases, to probably what it reveals the most about us is how we need to be loved and we need to love other people. And whether that also extends to animals and robots, it seems to be the case. Thank you.
lecture. Liz has agreed to take some questions, and I'm here to chair the process. So those of you who are interested in asking a question, please raise your hands. And, yes.
So what do you think the equivalent of the Turing test would be that would dictate whether or when robots did merit human rights protections?
That robots were what? Sorry?
Would merit human rights protections? Or,
I mean, I think this all came about, the human rights thing, because the European Commission were worried about self-driving cars. And they're worried about who takes responsibility when a car kills somebody. And so they're trying to ascribe some rights and responsibilities to AI. And personally, I don't think that robots deserve human rights, even if they pass a Turing test. Because a Turing test just tells you whether people think they're interacting with a human or not.
there's something beyond the Turing test where something has achieved true sentience. So what would be that test?
I don't think we're quite at that point yet. I don't know what the test would be, but I guess we'll come to that when it happens.
You mentioned that some people like robots and some don't, and explored some possible reasons for that with in-group, out-group bias and other sorts of biases. But what do you think are the main differences by people who connect with robots and those who don't?
In terms of the healthcare robots, it's a lot to do with whether they have a perceived need. So if you're sick and you need help with something, you want to remain in your home for longer, for example, then anything that can help you, you see as positive. Whereas if you don't have a need, then you don't need the robot and you don't tend to like it as much. The other interesting thing is that people who are more lonely see more mind in robots. So it's almost like they have this need and it's not being fulfilled, and that robots can help meet that need.
Sorry.
Oh, hi, thanks very much for a very interesting talk, Liz. I'd just like you to comment on the trade-off between pets and robots. I mean, we have an SPCA cat, very low capital cost. We think he likes being around us, and we talk to him a lot, but he often disappoints and is sometimes a pain in the extremities and a very high maintenance cost. But he's certainly a companion. So would we trade off from one to the other?
I mean, I think if you're able to look after a real animal, then the real animal is going to be better. But, in some rest homes or even in some apartments, you can't actually keep a real animal. And in that case, then a robotic animal could be a good alternative. I mean, again, with the robotic animals, sometimes you give them to people and they respond really, really well. It's amazing. Like, they won't talk to people, these people with dementia, but you give them the robot and suddenly they start talking to it and they start patting it and talking to it as if it is a real animal. And then you get other people who say, no, it's just a stupid toy. I don't want to interact with that. And it doesn't seem to matter whether people had a pet previously or not, at least in our studies.
Okay, I was just interested in family bias, or what I believe is a family bias. You're saying it's sort of in-group and out-group. Well, that's a natural response, is to actually trying to want to have a family around you. And I think it gets a lot of bad press by being, you're not liking these other people, but you're wanting to keep something close to you. But if you work on that a bit better, I think it could be a very good support group. The robot becomes part of the family in that kind of way. And thank you, you're doing a really great job, so cool.
Yeah, I mean, there have been studies where they sort of add a ribbon to the robot and they give you the same colour ribbon and you form a close relationship with it. So you can certainly do things to increase that feeling of relatedness.
How long before Pharmac will start funding robots for elder care?
I don't know how long it's going to be, but I think being having the FTA approving PARO as well as the Europeans approving PARO, I think that's going to be helpful towards the robots being approved in New Zealand as well. I mean, it would be really great if we can help fund these robots, because often, people come up to me after a talk like this and ask how much PARO is because they want one for their relative, but it's too expensive.
Yeah, I have a question. So how much do you think is like, I don't know how to say this and be politically correct, but like as a computer scientist, I can't imagine walking past and patting it on the head and talking to it because I know how it works. So I wonder how much of that, I don't know if it's an age thing or, if you've worked as a computer scientist, or I wonder what your opinion is on that.
Well, we've had robots at home when I was testing them. And even though you know that they're robots, you have PARO on and you can't help but talk to him. You can't help but pet him. And the same when we had Irobi at home as well. I mean, he doesn't even have voice recognition, but I would speak to him, and it seems to be something sort of like maternal that comes out in you, natural, that you have these bonds with creatures. So maybe computer scientists don't have that, but I think probably they do.
Can I just make a comment, Pat? There may come a time when you start to lose those.
Yeah, actually my question is sort of related, and that's, have you noticed any gender differences in terms of reactions with the robots within the healthcare industry?
No gender differences. Because you might think that women might respond better, but no, it's the same.
Thank you. As a psychologist, do you see them being used, rightly or wrongly, for psychological therapies? And if so, how do you govern inappropriate use or prevent it?
Yeah, I mean, as a psychologist, and I'm not a clinical psychologist, I'm a research psychologist, but I do see huge potential for using robots for improving people's mood or things like that. So there are quite a few programs, for example, CBT on the internet, interacting with computer characters, that have been shown to be beneficial. So it does seem like you can deliver psychological therapies through computers and through robots. And so, I mean, it's definitely an area for future research, and there does need to be some oversight, I think, to make sure that, and that's what the research is for, to find out whether it works or not.
We all see all the press, sure, robots are coming, taking the jobs and so forth. And what you've been showing is how much the physicality of robots makes a difference, whereas lots of the job replacement is at a distance AI, robotics automation, robotic process automation, those sorts of things, which is basically software doing what people do. So if you thought that people actually made a physical robot, do you think people would like it or abuse it?
Well, I mean, there are physical robots out there. We had our robots in people's homes for 4 months, and we had robots at Salmon Village, and none of them came back damaged. I was a little bit afraid that some of them might end up at Otara Market, but...
Did they take any of the nurses' jobs, though?
No, they haven't. And when we initially did our research at Salmon Village, some of the carers, they were worried about their jobs being taken away. But when we showed them the robots, they realised that the robots were not capable of doing the jobs that they do. And so they were reassured. And they were very, very fond of Paro because Paro helps to calm down the people and actually, you know, helps with dementia care.
Okay, so thank you so much. That was really enlightening. From your robotic definition perspective, do you consider pure software robots as well? There are a lot of robots that are getting used in industry like robotic process automation and others. So RPA or any other, for example, Siri, Google Assistant, and Alexa, purely not something that is existing, pure software robots. Did you consider them in part of your research?
Yeah, so chatbots and, you know, yeah,
the
Google
chatbot and
assistants and things like that. I mean, personally, I don't consider them robots.
And why? Because they don't have a structure?
Well, some of them do have a structure, but they don't move. The critical thing for me is movement. And so they are able to sense the environment and act upon the environment and have some form of movement. I mean, there's a huge discussion and debate about what is a robot and what isn't. And there are people out there that even think that your iPhone is a robot. So that's just my personal opinion.
I was curious about mannerisms and research that way. For instance, with the kids bullying the robot, what was the robot indicating pain or crying or that kind of thing? Things like if you painted a static smile on one of the healthcare robots, would it be perceived more positively, or put a blindfold on a robot to say, no, I really am not looking at you, that kind of thing. Any research in those types of areas?
There has been some research in terms of, say, having a robot in someone's house and they don't like it because they think it's watching them, and so they have to have the robot turn around and face the wall, and that made it more acceptable to people. So yeah, people are very concerned about their privacy, and we do obviously have to respect privacy. In terms of, people bullying robots, not that I know of, have they made the robot cry. That would be an interesting experiment to do.
Autism's going to be a huge impost on the economy, especially in America. A lot of people on the autism spectrum require lifelong institutionalisation. There's a type of therapy for kids, a behavioural therapy, so you can basically get them to function more normally. Do you think there's a future for robots to be used for delivering that therapy to children and also older adults who, it would have to be some sort of interactive artificial intelligence?
Yeah, there's a lot of research looks at robots for children with autism. And, typically they make a robot that is more, has more simple expressions than a human would. So it's trying to teach children about emotions and about mind by having a very simple robot. And I mean, so far most of the studies have been observational, so they haven't been randomised trials. So it's, while some of the results are very promising, you can't, there hasn't been enough research yet to say that they really make a difference. But there's certainly a lot of people looking at that. And there's certainly other research looking at robots for children in hospital, so children who've got diabetes or something like that. And, robots have been shown to be a good distraction when children are having an injection, for example, a flu vaccine. And so it decreases the children's distress.
Maybe 2 more questions. There been any research into different cultural perceptions of robots? Because I've heard some things about in movies in more sort of Western movies, there's a much more of a robots are going to take over the world and kill us approach, whereas in often Eastern movies there's somewhat of a more
healthcare robots, robots in your home to assist you with tasks, much more sort of a friendly approach. I was wondering if there was any statistical evidence as to whether that sort of social perception of robots through media and the likes had affected the actual perception of these robots when they were presented.
There has been research that compares, say, Japanese people's opinions about robots compared to, say, Germans' opinions about robots. And it tends to be that the Asians have more positive perceptions about robots, like you're saying. But I'm not aware of any research that has tried to work out whether the mechanism is via what movies they watch.
My questions on one of the slides had adherence to medication and showed a vast improvement from 25 to 50% with robot-assisted adherence to medication in that lung study. So what do you find as the challenges and limitations of robots in achieving results in that area, for instance?
I mean, one of the huge challenges is trying to work robots into the doctor's everyday practice. And so doctors are already, you know, hugely overwhelmed with patients and other things that they have to do. And so if we wanted to have robots in people's houses on a long-term basis, we'd have to somehow change the way that doctors work so that they would check the information from the robot and check that people's health is not going downhill. And so I think that's one of the challenges, and working with DHBs might not be the best way to go because DHBs have got lots of other costs, especially in Middlemore at the moment. But if we can somehow do it with GPs, it might work out better. Because another one of the challenges is also looking after the technical difficulties. So if the robots have, their screen freezes or something, then people would ring up the engineers and we'd have to, fix it. And that's, you can't, well, you'd have to have some kind of organisation, technical organisation that would be there to answer the patient's questions.
Thank you.
All right, then, in the interest of time, I think we should probably draw this lecture to a close, but I'd just like to say, first of all, it's been a pleasure to act as chair for this lecture, and I'd just like to thank Liz for what has been a very insightful and entertaining foray into what I believe is the future, whether you like it or not, I think. And so those of you who are interested in coming and meeting Paro, here for a little while longer, I believe. So if you would just join me in thanking Elizabeth for a wonderful